vice president of programming at Audacy. I think I have that right. And he runs the legendary WFAN in New York. Probably does a lot of other stuff that I don't even know about as well. Also hosts a music podcast called Carl Landry Record Club. Please welcome Spike Eskin to the Gallen of Questions podcast. Spike, my friend, how are you, buddy?
How do you like that, Pat? Vice president. How do you like that, huh?
Someone gave you that title, like, willingly?
Somebody said to me once, they're like, look, if there's not a president of what you are, then there's no such thing as the vice president of what you are. And there's no president of programming for WFAN, so it seems like a fake title for program director. But
why is that, by the way?
So they in our company they changed program director to brand manager, which would be fine if it didn't go from. I mean, I don't know if anybody cares about, but it goes from director to manager, which is sort of like a step down. But Mark Chernoff, who was my predecessor at WFAN, got the title vice president years ago. So part of the sell job to get me to WFAN was you'll be a vice president. I was like, all right, sure.
It worked.
Yeah.
It sounds fancy on you.
Yeah.
Of that whole list of things I just mentioned, is there anything I missed?
Also in charge of CBS Sports Radio and
I did miss
the
that.
National Network with Jim Rome, Maggie Perloff, DA, and Zach Gill. So
You're a very
that too.
busy man. How do you keep it all together?
I don't know. It's getting harder as they get older, to be quite honest with you. It's
You have a youthful look, though, so that's good.
Yeah. Well, I tell my wife all the time because like I do the hoodies and tattoos and yada yada yada. I was like, at some point, I would just look like an old guy. I'll be like that Steve Buscemi meme, like the "Hello, fellow kids." And I said, when I stop looking like young for my age, and I start looking like an old guy that's trying to look young for my age, you got to tell me, and then I'll make an adjustment.
Yeah, but then what are you gonna do? Wear a suit? You're not gonna do that.
No. Yeah. I mean, this is who I am. So.
It's way down the road.
Yeah.
We actually have a history together doing podcasts. How many do you think we did? I don't have the number, but I was just wondering if you had any idea.
So
this was like, what, at least 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, it was in between when I worked at WISP and WIP, so that would have been 2010, I think. So the interesting thing is if you go back on the Rights to Ricky Sanchez feed, it is the same podcast feed that our podcast was on. So if you scroll, I kept it. So if you scroll all the way back, there's some WIP shows I did, an Eagles podcast I had, but our podcasts are there.
I did not know. It would take me forever to scroll back, though, right? Because you have like a zillion podcasts.
Yeah, but I'll send them to you. They're there. They're like the files are there, and you could listen to them if you wanted to. So our podcasts.
I kind of want to
yeah.
listen. Did we have a name? I don't even remember. I got to go back and listen.
I don't think so, but yeah, we have a podcast history together. We were coming up together at the same time.
Now I'm excited. I want to listen to it.
Trying to make it in the world. I haven't heard those podcasts ever. So.
It's probably so bad.
Yeah.
But did you ever think that you would have a podcast that is as popular as the Rights to Ricky Sanchez?
By the
Did
way,
that ever
I'm
cross
looking
your
at
mind?
one. I'm sorry for not answering you because I just Googled our names together. And February 11th, 2011, we did a podcast. It was the 7th one I had on the feed. And it said Spike and Pat Gallen talk Avant and Brizgalov.
That is probably just thrilling stuff.
Stuff has gotten better in Philadelphia, I would say.
That can't be the only one we did, though,
no,
right?
No,
there was a bunch.
It was just the first one that popped up. Oh,
I
here we go.
gotcha. Okay.
Headlines with Spike and Pat Gallen. Anyway, so I'll find that.
What were we trying to do there? I don't know.
I don't know. It was early in the podcast game, man. We were pretty early.
Exactly. I was doing one with like Phillies Nation in 2010, I guess, around the same time. This was before we knew what it would be, and I actually got some pretty good guests. And then, for some reason, I stopped. I probably shouldn't have done that. But you have a very popular one. You and Mike Levin.
Yeah.
Did you ever think it would be like this?
No, and we're 10 years in. Like this is our 10th season, and it'll be 10 years in July, and I'm amazed that it's gone so long. I think we noticed that it was popular when we first did a lottery party. We started the podcast in July of whatever year it was, of 2012, or 2013, And then we did that lottery party in June or whatever, almost a year in. And there were a few hundred people there. And it was weird because, early days of the podcast, early days of podcasts, you don't really know who's listening,
Right.
And there's not, the social media wasn't quite as vigorous as it is now. So, but now, like, we've had a really cool run, man. And I think Mike said it a couple of months ago. Because, over the last few years, we've talked about, well, when do we end it? Do we end at this point? And he was like, I don't even know what my life would be like if I wasn't doing the podcast twice a week now. So now it just, now it's just like part of our lives. But
to keep Mike's heart beating, you've got to keep this podcast going.
Yeah, well, I mean, the people, like, you get emails about how much it means to be, like, us keeping it going through the pandemic. We still did 2 a week even when basketball shut down, and that was, I think it meant a lot to me, and I think it meant a lot to the people who listen. And now we'll get like emails saying, hey, I started listening when I was in middle school, and I just graduated college, and I'm engaged.
That's cool.
And like, holy cow, So we've been in people's lives for a long time. It's really, I think more so than that it being big is that there are just so many people who it means a lot to for one reason or another,
Sure.
and that is really neat to me,
I'm a fan of the podcast. I'd be lying if I said I was able to listen to like every episode, like the true fans, because in this business it's like Eagles for like 7 or 8 straight months, and then basically at the All-Star break is when I have to start paying attention actually to basketball. Not that I don't throughout the year.
Yeah.
I hope my bosses don't listen to this, but why? But for you guys, like, why does it work? How does it work?
Don't know. I think, like, look, I think one of the things we lucked out with is when we started it, there was just a lot less competition, right? Like, there were just not as many podcasts, and the Sixers were so bad that we were the only one. I think the other thing is, if you look at podcasts on the internet, you go into an app or something, there's so many podcasts where people do like 23 episodes and then stop.
Yeah.
They just it's not popular enough. They get bored. But we've been so consistent. We don't, it's always 2 a week. I think there's 1 week a year where we take off, sometimes in August. And it's not even usually both of us. Sometimes he'll take a week and I'll take a week, and the pod will keep up. So I think
That's
being
it?
reliable has been part of it, just like that we're always there. So when something happens, when there's a Sixers thing that happens, they know, oh, like we just outlast everyone because we're so consistent, And then I think the other thing is and I've learned to appreciate this. I would say like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I would get mad that he wouldn't feel the way that I do about something. Like I would think he was stupid or something. But then I've realized that even the way we approach like doing the show, I'm pretty structured in the way that I do it. I like to have fun, but I'm sort of leading it, and he meanders. And even sort of the way he feels about the team until this year been always pretty optimistic, where I've always been like the realist guy or whatever. And not that they're roles that we decided on. It just sort of, that's who we are as people. So I think
Right.
if somebody was to come on the pod and come and listen, and they heard 2 people like me, they'd be like, they don't even like the Sixers. Like the listener would be like, these guys just think they're gonna suck all the time. And if it was Mike, it would just be fanboy stuff, and I don't think it would live up to. I just don't think it would live up to the bad moments the same way, or live up to the Ben Simmons moments or things like that. So I think there's a lot of different reasons, but I think they're all sort of important.
We've gone like 10 minutes, and we haven't even talked about the actual basketball team that you talk about on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
The Sixers-Bucks game from Saturday, I don't know if it's just me, but it felt like a turning point in the way maybe we think about this team, because I went to bed that night right before the start of the fourth quarter, and the Philly in me was like, no, not happening, forget it. So I turned it off and I went to bed. And they come back, 48-point fourth quarter, amazing. Does that feel like a sign to you in the way that it does for me?
Oh, Pat, it's adorable. If it's funny, if you there's one thing from a group chat, so that's not for this, but if you go to our Twitter, the Rice Ricky Sanchez Twitter, about 2 hours before the game, we tweeted out, all right, so this is the game that they win that tricks us all into believing they'll be good in the playoffs, right? And we even, we had a bet from the gambling company that DraftKings, you can cut that out if you want. I don't know if you're allowed to say that, but we did a parlay saying that they would win and all that kind of stuff. And they beat the Bucks once a year. It was like the 2019 Christmas game where they always beat a team like this in a situation like this. And if you're negative leading up to it, you're like, this might actually be the year. And that was the game. So I remember it, Yeah, I don't feel any different, really. My expectations have not gotten too high or too low this year. Right in the middle. I think the one thing that you could say about them this year overall, not just that game, is they have had a propensity to battle back more than they had in previous years. Mm-hmm. But that said, it seems like in the NBA that, because the Sixers seem like they've given up a lot of big leads too, it seems like in the NBA everybody battles back at some point. So I'm sorry, this is a long answer. I always think that because I watch all the Sixers games, and I watch other NBA, but I mostly just watch the Sixers games, I always felt like I had a good idea of the rest of the league because I would see every team between 2 and 5 times in addition to the Sixers.
Sure.
But sometimes I think when you're only concentrating on one team, there will be something that they do that you think is unique to that team, either frustrating or good. And I think like the blowing leads thing seems like it's only the Sixers, but it truly isn't. It's every single team in the league blows leads this year. So there's a long answer to say I don't really feel any different, but I didn't feel bad before, and I also didn't feel good.
So that gave you no hope that they could steal a 7-game series from Milwaukee or even Boston?
No.
Not even a tinge?
No. I think they would. I would think they would be pretty. In my opinion, in my heart, I don't know what the odds would say, but they would be pretty significant underdogs to both of those teams. Both of those teams are, when it counts, really hard to score on and much more athletic than the Sixers. And the Sixers sneakily defensively have not. I know overall for the season it looks like they've been good, but they really haven't over the last 40 or 50 games or so, or 35 or 40 games. So I would give them, I'm trying to think what percentage chance I give them. Between a 15 and 20% chance of beating one of those teams. So not nothing, but not also not likely.
Right. I guess that's a fair amount. Now, we're taping this before the Timberwolves game, or actually it's about to start.
Yeah.
So I guess that'll tell us a little bit more about where. But the defense has been really bad over the last 5 games. They've had the worst defense in the entire NBA or something in the last 5 games, but also the best offense. Where do you come down? I'm sure if we listen to all the Ricky podcasts, we would get a better sense of this. But for those that are uninitiated, your thoughts on Doc Rivers? Because if you go to Twitter on any given night, on any given day, at any given time, people hate Doc Rivers in this town, right or wrong. Where do you fall in that?
So I've always said on the pod, and I was a Brett Brown advocate, and I've generally been a Doc Rivers detractor. That said, I don't think coaches in the NBA make that big of a difference. I think that there's probably 4 or 5 great coaches, and there's probably 5 or 6 really bad coaches, and then every other coach is just sort of some coach in the middle, and if the team's good enough, they can win, and if they're not, then they can't. I think Doc probably fits in there, maybe in the middle. I think historically he's overrated. I think currently in Philadelphia he's probably overblamed for things that go wrong. It's funny. Every time they lose, it is like Doc didn't make the right substitution. But every time they win, it's not like, boy, Doc nailed that substitution.
No, it's in spite of him they've won.
Right. So he's like, I always think that coaches, not always, but a lot of times, especially in baseball or basketball, coaches are a conduit for us to like not have to face the facts about the team. And if you can say that the reason they're not as good as you want them to be is because of the coach, then you don't really have to face the reality that maybe just the team's not good enough and that there's not like an easy fix. So when they hired him, it's funny, I remember arguing, one of the strangest things in my career, Angelo had me arguing with Billy King, former Sixers general manager Billy King, on the air about Doc Rivers. It was before they hired Daryl, and we argued about it, and I said, I don't think he's actively bad, but I don't think he's going to fix anything. Like, I don't think he's going to solve any of the problems that they have. And I think I still land in the same place, in that he makes some bad decisions, he makes some okay decisions, but ultimately they're going to win or lose because of James and Joel, not because of that.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's a perfect segue, because Joel Embiid has been incredible, MVP-like, as he has been the last few years. I feel like we've reached a point now where, at least when I watch him, I feel like I'm underappreciating just how ridiculous and how special he is on a nightly basis. And I've been seeing things from people about how he's usually like the old heads, like he doesn't play enough defense, why doesn't he rebound, this or that. But like, a guy that size should not be doing the things he does in the way that he does them, and yet he scored 42 points last night, and we were like, it's like yawn when a guy's that size scores 42 points. It shouldn't be that way. So I feel like we're kind of at the place now where we don't appreciate what he does enough.
Yeah, he's having a pretty fantastic offensive season, and he's gotten to the point, I think one of the reasons that sort of the numbers fly under the radar is, first of all, the numbers are all sort of crazy in the NBA this year. I think there's like 6 or 7 players scoring 30 points a game, which has never, ever happened.
No.
But he has a few unguardable things that are not quite as spectacular as what a wing or a guard would do. So he'll get the ball 16 feet from the hoop and take a couple of dribbles and back the guy off and just shoot this 14-footer. And he makes it every single time. Like that 14-footer, he makes it every single time. And he's this weird combination of like, he's big like Shaq or something, but he's got this feathery jumper like Patrick Ewing had. And he, as far as defense, when he's engaged, he's the best defensive player on the team. He's the most important defensive player on the team. And when he's engaged, he's a pretty special defensive player. And he's also the best offensive player on the team. So it's really hard when everything runs through you on offense and everything runs through you on defense. And I think that's taken its toll. The rebounding thing's a little weird this year in that it's by far, he's never been a great rebounder, but this is the worst rebounding season he's had of his career. But I think I think part of it is just like sort of pacing himself. He's never been healthy in the playoffs, not one time. So hopefully he gets to the playoffs and is whole, and we can properly judge his performance there.
I know that you are a huge fan of Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. You're a big fan of what they do out there in the Mile High City. But do you think there's a world where maybe Joel Embiid actually wins the MVP this year, just maybe by sheer pity?
No. I think Giannis could win over Jokic. The problem with Embiid is that I think the most games he can play now is like 68 or 69. And you figure down the stretch he probably misses. They probably sit him out of 3 more, so he's at 65 games. And it's just like, people seem pretty intent on Jokic. And like, I talk a lot of junk about Denver and Jokic, but they're in first place, and he's averaging a triple-double as a center. Like, it's a pretty, like, last year I don't think he had a rock-solid case, or the year before. This is, unfortunately, this is the year that Jokic probably has the most rock-solid case he's had.
It's crazy. How about James Harden? Because you could also make the case that he is still underrated with how great he is offensively.
Yeah.
You could also make the case that he's a bit overrated because he just doesn't look like the same player he was even a few years ago. does he have the ability to, I hate to go like, let's talk about basketball, but like it all comes down to Joel being healthy in the playoffs and James Harden finding some other gear that he hasn't really had in his career in the playoffs. Do you see that being a possibility? And I hate to ask that question because it's like, well, he's a great player, but the history kind of speaks for itself when it comes to the playoffs and James Harden.
Yeah, especially like in deciding games, in big deciding games, he has.
Yeah.
And part of it, maybe part of it has been the entire offense in previous years has revolved around him doing everything every time, and it hasn't been that way. And so I think that does two things when he gets to the playoffs. And by the way, my top line answer is I do not believe in him in the playoffs. That is the top line answer. But if I were to make a case for him in the playoffs, I would say that he also has gone into every playoffs. He's always played a lot of minutes, but with just an enormous weight that he's had to carry offensively. So that does two things. First of all, it means that he's more worn down. And then the other thing it means is that when you get into the playoffs and everybody's trying on defense, he just becomes a lot easier to defend because everything was revolving around him specifically. So if I were to make the case that this year is different, he is not the number one option on offense, even though he's the primary initiator, and so he should have more juice going into the playoffs, and the offense should be more diverse than anything he's done before. But sure. I think it's important. Yes, he's a great player, but if you want to be one of the best players of all time, you got to get to the finals, or wait, he was in the finals against one of his teams.
Oh, he was with Oklahoma City early.
Yeah. He was sixth man at the time, right?
Right.
He has to. This stuff matters. Like when you're talking about all-time legacy or whatever, leading a team, not collapsing in the playoffs, it matters. So I guess it's not impossible, but he has, to your point, he's got this body of work that suggests it's not going to happen. So I don't know why I would think it was going to happen unless it does happen,
If you could choose one thing about this team that bothers you to no end, because you're the negative one, what would it be?
Well, by the way, Mike has been the negative one this year. I haven't. It's been impossible to control him as the negative one. The thing that bothers Mike is overhelp on defense, and they do that, and there's wide open threes just constantly.
Yeah,
I would say he has snuck that into my head. When you're watching a Sixers game, the number of open threes the other team shoots is just. It's maddening, and Mike makes the point, and it's a good one. They don't even hard double, they half help. So they cheat. Mm-hmm. They cheat off their guy, like 3 steps, and what that does is it makes it they can't guard their own guy, and then they're not doing anything to the guy that has the ball. So they end up in no man's land, and that's when you see a guy shooting a wide open 3 and a Sixer running from 10 feet over with his arm out.
Have you pinpointed a reason for this?
Oh, what is it?
I said, have you pinpointed a reason for that? Have you figured it out yet?
No, it just seems like I don't know if it's scheme. It seems like they play as if they're more athletic than they are. That their recovery speed is better than they think it is. But it's been this way. I mean, for a few years now. Maybe it's but it's not even Doc's defense, right? At this point, it's Dan Burke's defense. So, So I don't know. We have not pinpointed it, but that is, I would say, currently that's the most maddening thing. Earlier in the year, I've never since the Sixers trade for James Harden, I have not enjoyed watching him. But I would say the last 20 games or so have been pretty enjoyable to watch. He has turned it up a notch, and he's been good to watch.
Is it too early? There's still a month of the season left. Do you have a prediction on how far you think this is going to go? Is this just another second round exit?
Yeah, if I had to predict, I think that's what it would be. And by the way, if they end up playing, look, Miami, it's not like Miami's good this year. They're not good. But they give the Sixers trouble every time they play them. And people get mad at me when I say this on the podcast because I've never really liked Jimmy Butler, but like there's something about the way Jimmy Butler feels about the Sixers that I don't think he would lose to them in a playoff series. Like I just don't think he would let it happen. So I would be nervous if they were playing Miami in the first round, but I still think they would win. I also think, but if I had to bet, I would bet that they win the first round and lose to Milwaukee or Boston, whoever they play in the second round.
I don't know. I'm a little more positive right now. I just want to keep it that way for as long as I can before I have to go down that hole again.
Who do you? I'm sorry, it's been so much of me talking. Who do you, who would you give them a better chance of beating, Boston or Milwaukee?
Milwaukee, I think. Okay. I don't think they can win 4 games if the series has to go to Boston. That bothers me, but I think they could steal a couple in Milwaukee, which would make it interesting. And that's just, it's basically a coin flip. But there's just something about the way they play the Celtics that gives me no hope. So I'd rather see them against Milwaukee than I would against Boston. But that's the whole point of the podcast. I brought you on so that you could talk.
Yeah.
But I've held you long enough. We're looking at 20-some minutes.
Okay.
I've deemed you popular enough that you get the Gallen of Questions can. So there's a bunch of random questions in here. Would you like to answer some of them?
Yeah, but I'm so honored to answer questions from the Gallen of Questions.
Yeah, sure you are. Would you rather eat nothing but mac and cheese forever or be forced to drink nothing but hot tea every day?
I'm going to take out, I'm vegan, so I'm going to take that consideration out because that would be a cheat.
Oh, I didn't know. I thought you were vegetarian. That's why I actually put mac and cheese in there because I thought.
No, but there's vegan mac and cheese, so we can.
That's true.
Yeah. Oh. Drink nothing but hot tea. So no matter, I enjoy the questions like this. We have a bit on the podcast. We do something like this. So just to clarify, no matter how long I leave the tea out, it's still hot.
It's always hot.
Right. Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure that there was no way around it.
Yeah. A little guy is coming over and refilling it, making sure that it's hot all day long. They're not easy, right?
As a former fat guy who was paranoid about getting fat again, the mac and cheese thing every day would really screw with my brain. I would do that. Oh, I would do the tea. You would do the tea. Yeah.
That's the law. I like how much effort you put into that one.
Yeah.
If you were forced to do one thing to save your life, would it be kick a 35-yard field goal, hit a half-court shot, or score a penalty kick against Andre Blake? What do you feel most confident in right there? 35-yard field goal, half-court shot, penalty kick against Andre Blake.
So half-court shot, no. Those are hard, and I like these. All 3 things are hard, but half-court shot, no.
You think that's the hardest of the 3?
I do. Now, I don't play, because my back or whatever, I don't play basketball regularly anymore, so
yeah.
I know the first time I got out there, I would miss the first half-court shot. It would be, it
would be short.
Yeah, and think about how small the hoop is compared to a football,
Yeah.
So then it goes to Andre Blake. Now, that sounds like the hardest one because Andre Blake is there. But really, all soccer penalty kicks are about the guy guessing right.
Sure.
I'm going to get slaughtered for this. I would pick the penalty kick.
There's no right or wrong answer. I don't think you're going to get slaughtered for it, but I've seen so many people that shouldn't hit half-court shots hit them recently that I feel like that might be the easiest of the bunch. But whatever, that's your answer. Who's the worst NBA player you love?
I mean, I love PJ.
You could go all time too if you wanted.
Oh, all time. Oh, well,
I might make it harder.
all time there was a Sixers, a center that I don't even think he made the team. I think he was just in summer league and training camp, named Matt Koshwal, M-A-C Koshwal, and I loved him. And I was an enormous believer in his. I love role players, right? So most of the players I like are in this middle zone where I love PJ Tucker, I like Robert Covington, I like I love Danny Green when he was here. Like, I love those guys that get blamed for everything but are somehow always there, consistently being that guy.
Yep.
So those are the players that I normally love. I really loved Matt Koshwal. I loved Nerlens, and he didn't end up being very good. Isaiah Cannon. Isaiah Cannon was a backup point guard, sometimes starting point guard for the Sixers.
Yeah.
And their worst team, they almost beat the 73-win Warriors at home. And it was...
I was at that game.
And Isaiah Cannon had a 4-point play from the corner, hit a big three from the corner with like 3 minutes left. We still talk about that play. So Isaiah Cannon, all time, was probably the worst player that I ever loved, and swore that he was great.
Yeah. What's your hidden talent?
I don't have any. This is all I got, brother.
It's not hidden.
No.
Yeah. Is ice cream between two waffles a sandwich?
Yes.
Favorite show as a kid?
Wonder Years.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, we got two more here. What's the most average condiment?
Average.
Yeah. Where you're like, yeah, okay, it's fine.
Well, ketchup is good.
Can't be great.
Mustard is good. Relish is fine.
You know what? When I came up with that question, that is the exact answer I thought of. I'm like, relish.
Yeah. I don't like
that's
or
all right.
dislike.
If it was on the
relish.
hot dog, I'd be like, all right, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's a perfect answer. Last one.
Okay.
Favorite team of all time? Any sport?
So that is the 1993-94 Knicks. Most of our listeners know I have a sordid history as a Knick fan in my teens and early 20s. And John Starks is my favorite basketball player of all time. And if you haven't read Blood on the Garden, it's a great book about the 90s Knicks that came out this past summer. But I love that team. Like, I love Charles Oakley. I love John Starks. I didn't love Ewing. I was a Starks guy over Ewing. But overall, that team I really, really enjoyed. Loved Anthony Mason. Even as that team, I loved Greg Anthony. I loved how tough that team was. It was an era of basketball that it was ugly and people don't really like talking about anymore. But I thought it was great. So.
Well, our time is up. Finally, we went way past the allotted 20 minutes or whatever I told you, but I appreciate that very much. Spike, you're the man. Thank you, my friend. Great to catch up with you. And we got to see each other at the Super Bowl for 5 minutes, so that was cool.
Yes, it was nice. I feel like I hadn't seen you in, like, years. You know? It's good to see you.
Well, a lot of people don't remember that I actually used to do some fill-in hosting at WIP back, so that was probably, like, the last time we actually physically bumped into each other.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember the sports.
How would you rate my sports talk radio skills?
I would say you were good, but if I had more time to work with you, I could have made you really good. You know?
Yeah.
Like you need, like, you're a little too likable. Let's see, everybody loves Pat. And I think, like, if I could just push you to maybe not having everybody like you all the time, like, maybe you would have been a little bit better.
I'll take that, and that'll be the final thing we say on this here program.
Okay.
Thanks, buddy.